sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
This is Rabbi Sherman, Rabbi on the Sidelines from Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. This week we are joined by a man that does not sleep 24 hours a day, and he gets it all done. Former president of the Miami Marlins, executive vice president of the Montreal Expos, world champion World Series in 2003, and host of the Nothing Personal podcast. We are joined this week by David Samson. David, it's so good to have you.
I'm happy to be here. How are you?
I am great, and I've been following you ever since I saw you on Bob Costas on Back on the Record a couple of months ago, and I listen every day to Nothing Personal. I don't know how you do a 45-minute monologue. That's hard for a rabbi to do, but for a podcaster, maybe a little easier. But yesterday, maybe it's because you're going to be on a rabbinic podcast, you actually chanted your Haftorah blessings for the public. What was that about?
So I have this amazing memory. I was bar mitzvahed in 1981. At Park Avenue Synagogue in New York City.
Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove, I remember, grew up here at Sinai Temple.
So there you go. The rabbi for me was Rabbi Panich back then, a great, great man. And I just remember that my voice, I was short. I wanted to be in the NBA. And for whatever reason, my mother smoked, so I was not going to be 7'2". So I realized that it's a tough day when you know you have a better chance of owning a team than playing on a team. But I remember thinking to myself, all right, what's next? So I said, how about performance? How about acting and singing? Because I loved the microphone. I loved to be the center of attention. I was the class clown, probably undiagnosed ADHD or ADD. Got kicked out of class all the time at Horace Mann, where I went to school from first grade until 12th grade. And I just figured, all right, let me try singing. So I joined the chorus. And in the beginning of 7th grade, I was at the left side of the chorus, and I had a very high voice like this. And then all of a sudden, as is God's way, things started to change. And I slowly moved down the line. And by the end of 7th grade, my voice had changed. And I was now sort of on the baritone side. So I'm practicing for my bar mitzvah. I'm getting my Haftorah ready to go. The portion was Kitisa.
Beautiful. Golden calf. You got it.
I can't believe I remember that. Unbelievable, actually. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. And back then, you could get an audio tape of your bar mitzvah.
Yes.
There wasn't the production that it is now. I had a luncheon after my bar mitzvah with a few friends, and it was certainly not the big Megillah that it is now. So I started doing the blessings before the Haftorah, and I had this voice, Baruch Atah, sort of like the kid in Keeping the Faith, one of my favorite movies.
Love that movie. Ben Stiller.
It's one of my absolute favorites.
Mine too.
And I was like that boy, and I had this high crackling voice, and finally I just said, I can't keep this up for the entire portion. It's absolutely making me crazy. So the audio tape of my bar mitzvah is Baruch Atah Adonai. And then I continue on like that, and I never forgot it. And when I was cleaning up once, because I keep a pretty clean house, and I was cleaning out something because it was time to move on to make new memories, I came across the audio tape of my bar mitzvah, and it was just in my head, and I don't know what it had to do with the show, which is a little nugget for you, Rabbi, that maybe you find when you're doing your show. I go into this trance-like state during Nothing Personal, sort of like Will Ferrell in Old School during the debate portion of the competition. And I just sort of have an out-of-body experience. And when my producer talks to me about the show after the show, I don't remember more than half the things I said. So I do remember singing my portion on the show. I don't remember why.
Actually, Jimmy Dykes of ESPN wrote a book called The Film Doesn't Lie. It was about sports, but it was actually about faith, that, you know, the film is our life and God's watching. And yes, you had the audio tape, but now we're in 2022 and each kid gets a live stream YouTube. And it's true. I always tell each kid, especially if they love sports, the film will not lie on your bar mitzvah day.
And believe me, you're being scouted.
For sure. For sure. And that really is the intersection of sports and faith. I mean, listening to you actually more than once have brought up that bar mitzvah date in 1981. So it seems like faith had some type of impact on your journey to sports. So you mentioned briefly that, you know, weren't going to play in the NBA, but perhaps can own a team. very briefly that journey to the Montreal Expos, also a fascinating relationship with, I believe, your stepfather and your mother, who then end up separating, but you go into business with your stepfather. What was that all about?
Oh God, that was about years of therapy, and that was a situation where I was on Wall Street. I'm a lawyer, and I passed the New York bar, and then I started a company in Europe, and then I made it to Wall Street after that. And I was asked simply as a nice Jewish son to help his stepfather buy a baseball team, and for me, it was very transactional. And I had a rate, my hourly rate, and I charged that. And I said, I'm happy to help you, no problem. And then I got the call from my mom, David, you have to help him run the team. I said, I'm happy to help, but here's what the contract will have to be. Here's what the rate will be, and I'll do it for 30 days, et cetera. And after 30 days, the call comes, are you sure you don't want to do it more? I said, if I do, I'm going to have to leave Morgan Stanley. And so eventually I ended up being the executive vice president of the Expos, and I did it full time. And we ended up, I didn't own the team, but I sold it for him back to baseball and bought the Marlins for him in 2002. And then in 2003, before the season started in spring training, he came into my office in Jupiter, Florida, and said that he was going to divorce my mother. And I said, okay, are you telling me that as president of your team or as your stepson? Like, which is it? Because when you work with family, I had a rule, a very, very simple rule, which is there's got to be a separation of church and state, if I could say that on this show. When we are talking, if we're at the Seder table, then let's be at the Seder table, and I'm in your family, you're my stepfather. I don't want to talk about whether or not we have to trade Miguel Cabrera. I don't want to talk about the ballpark deal. I am there to be your son. But if we have to do business, then just say it. So at the beginning of every conversation throughout our entire career together, we would give a look to each other and say business or family. Wow. And even after he and my mother got divorced, I continued to work for him. We just ended up getting different lawyers when we negotiated extensions and contracts and renewals, et cetera. But we still had, basically, we were together as family, even though he wasn't my stepfather anymore. He was still involved in my life, and I have a sister who's his daughter, my half-sister, but to me, she's my sister. And so there's still that connection. So we still kept saying business or family.
So separation of church and state. That's where I want to delve into. Obviously, Rabbi on the Sideline. I started this podcast about 18 months ago during the pandemic. Growing up in Syracuse, New York, had a passion for sports. Syracuse University Orange. Those are the Lakers. Those are our Yankees. The synagogue stopped when there was a Syracuse-Georgetown game, Syracuse-Duke game. You did not program. My father was a rabbi there. And it has really come up in the news recently, specifically with the Supreme Court in the Coach Kennedy case. And you spoke about that actually a couple of weeks ago on Nothing Personal, and it's been written about actually in different Harvard Law reviews as well. What is that case really about? And can somebody bring prayer into the sports atmosphere? And what did you see specifically in the Marlins and the Expos in 18 years of baseball? Is there faith in the game of baseball, either publicly or private?
So let's do the second part first, because faith is a big part of sports. And it's a big part in several ways. And let's break it down if you don't mind. There are players, basically a clubhouse. When you walk into a clubhouse, you have to look at it as though you are walking into a community, into a society. There are different groups of people. There are different religions. There are different colors. There are different sizes. There's different beliefs. There's different goals. There are different roles. Everything that you find in a clubhouse is just a microcosm of what you find in a society. Yes. So the first time I ever walked in a clubhouse, I thought about that. And I realized that in order to be an effective team president, I had to understand, much like being the president of the United States, even though I had no delusions of grandeur, that wasn't my job. But I viewed it as though I was responsible for everybody, were it to be that that's how presidents feel. But I am responsible for everybody, and to be responsible for everybody, I have to understand everybody. And to understand everybody, I have to be willing to listen to everybody. And if you're going to listen to everybody, you have to be open to the possibility that what makes them tick, what they believe in, is not what you believe in. And that what makes them become a better player or a better citizen, a better husband, a better wife, a better friend, may not be, in your mind, what makes you better at those different roles. And that is a very complicated bridge to cross, right? Because confirmation bias, in my mind, is the number one problem in our world, where we are all in echo chambers. We only want to preach to the choir and talk to people. There's another reference. And just talk to people who will affirm that which we believe, not test any of our hypotheses. So I went the other way, and I became almost a contrarian, where not only was I open to what anybody was saying, I would test what people would say to me and test whether or not I wanted to adopt those very principles, those very thoughts. And by testing myself that way, I feel I became a better person and a better president and a better executive. So within the clubhouse, you've got different religions. What's interesting about players that I find more in a clubhouse than anywhere else is the ability to articulate and credit God for physical attributes and physical accomplishments.
Interesting.
So I don't often, when I'm in a boardroom and I'm negotiating a deal and a deal gets done, I have yet to hear either myself or anyone on any side say, before I start, I just want to thank God. Right? You don't hear that. But athletes, when they do something, they tend to say, many of them, before I say another word, I just want to thank God. So I asked a player about that, Rabbi, and here was the answer that I got the overwhelming majority of the time. They're not thanking God because they can hit a fastball. They're not thanking God because they can shoot a three-point shot or because they hit the game-winning grand slam or because they were able to not make an error on a sharp ground ball to short. It turns out they're thanking God for the opportunity to hit the ground ball, to make the defensive play, hit the home run, and to make the money and to have the life they have that they could not have pictured but for athletics. And that is a very interesting, subtle difference. Yes. So it's not thanking God for the result. It's thanking God for the opportunity to get the result. So then I've said to players, do you blame God when you have a crappy game? Like, how does that work? Because if you're going to be not a consequentialist on this, then is it possible that when you're in an 0 for 20 slump, do you pray? Tell me what you do so I can be helpful? And they're not consistent. I didn't find a player who'd ever be willing to go to God on the downside, right? It's just on the upside, and I find that to be very interesting.
So actually, when I was in rabbinical school at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Upper West Side, 122nd and Broadway, our theology teacher, Rabbi Dr. Neil Gimel of blessed memory, told each one of us to write a personal theology. The artist drew a picture, the composer wrote a song, and since my passion was sports, I said, you know what? It's God as coach. And in that, I said, pretty similar to what actually that player told you. I said, you know, and you have experience of hiring and firing coaches, Mattingly, Martinez, McKeon, etc. Maybe you can expand on that. Who gets the blame at the end of the day? Is it the 0 for 20 hitter or is it the coach? And who gets the praise at the end of the day? Is it the champion coach or is it the player? I mean, we're dealing with this here locally with the Lakers right now. Maybe you can expand on that in terms of God as coach, not coach as God, but God as coach.
So the general principle is that everybody, and this is going to sound very cynical and awful, but if we're going to have an open conversation, we should have it. The concept of self-preservation. It is an overwhelming pull that people have. And in sports and in business, just by the way, probably at your shul as well. If membership is down, right, and people are not paying their dues and you're having budget issues, the board at some point is going to say, is it a rabbi issue? Is it a location issue? Is it a circumstances issue? What is that issue, and then how do we deal with it? The board will never say, oh, it's a board leadership issue. We need a better chairperson of the board, or we need a bigger board or a smaller board, or we need to increase the gift that is required of the board. You do not look to yourself when you are in a position where you can blame others. And that makes me feel so very shallow. But the reality is, if our team's not playing well, I'm not firing myself, and I'm not going to tell my boss. I have one boss, the owner. I'm not going to tell the owner it's my fault. And I can't very well fire 25 players. So it's down to either the GM or the manager. And that's why you see such high turnover, that first you start with the manager. When that doesn't work, you move to the general manager. When that doesn't work, you get rid of all the players. But never do you see a president or an owner say, mea culpa. I got to get less involved. Every decision I make is bad. George Steinbrenner never said, oh, I shouldn't have signed that player. He stinks. Doesn't work that way. And if you take that out into the real world and go
Yes.
into your business, wherever you work, you'll find that people in positions of authority are loath to blame themselves for poor results. And as horrible as that sounds, I'm just telling you how it is.
Absolutely. And then what about faith in the public sphere, right? We go to the Kennedy piece, and Dave Sims, the sportscaster for the Seattle Mariners, there's a lot of college basketball, football. He actually mentioned this as well, right? Thank you for the home run, but not for the strikeout. Coach Kennedy, high school coach, praised publicly in the 50-yard line, doesn't invite his players, but in the public sphere. What do you see with that piece? In
Well,
major league teams
Rabbi, you're glossing over the main issue, right? The main issue is that these are kids who are under 18, and you just sort of said, oh, he doesn't ask the players, he doesn't tell the players. Yet there are players who say, if I don't pray, am I going to lose playing time? Am I going to not get plays called for me if I'm even in the game at all? And Kennedy's response was, well, wait a minute. I named to be captains of the team 2 guys who never come to the prayer circle, as though that is an explanation. It's sort of like saying, I'm not racist, I have a black friend, right? You can't say that. Not that you could say that, but it's not very effective and it's not really a good argument. So him saying that is in no way dispositive when it comes to the ruling and the rule of law. And the question is with freedom of religion, and the question is with separation of church and state, which is basically saying if you are going to be a public entity, you cannot, and this goes all the way back to England times, right? We cannot in any way enforce upon other people any sort of religion, because that could be heading down the slippery slope of occupation, if you will. And so the court has been very interested in this topic. And the court, as it's made up now, I'm afraid to say, given certain things that are going on, certainly in the Roe v. Wade and other things that you're seeing in a conservative court, the problem is that you could see some sort of fogginess develop between that line. And the concern that I would have is that if you make that line anything other than firm, you are opening yourself up to extremes. And that's, to me, where I land. I am very much centrist, and I find the progressive left to be as unfortunate as the progressive right. And I feel as though people in the center are marginalized, like we're the middle class, that you have to be one or the other or you've lost your voice. But I think that when it comes to the Supreme Court, what's supposed to happen is they're supposed to apply the law, and they're supposed to not be political. And the problem is we're not seeing that anymore. And this Kennedy case is being watched very, very carefully.
So actually, Professor Sanford Levinson, who's a visiting professor at Harvard, said it's a case of religious believers versus secular oppressors, which says it's the extremes, not necessarily the centrists. Now take that to the college level for a moment, right? We have a question from the viewers about perhaps a Jewish athlete that would play at Notre Dame. Or I spoke to Coach Matt Doherty after his UNC days, but he spoke about the priest on the bench at when he was at Notre Dame, obviously Villanova, etc. I'm a Big East person, so many priests were down at that bench. What's your thought of that piece? Obviously, it's a private institution, but you're playing in a public sphere.
So I think it's all about expectation. So I went to a Jewish summer camp, a Jewish residential summer camp in Eagle River, Wisconsin, called Camp Interlochen. It really helped shape me and made me who I am in every way. Actually, only the good stuff. The bad stuff didn't come from camp. And we did the motzi before every meal. We did the beer cot after every meal. We had Friday night services, Saturday morning services, Havdalah. It was a conservative camp, not Orthodox. And there were non-Jews at the camp. The non-Jews at the camp would sit at the table. They wouldn't have to say the motzi. They had to keep kosher because on the table it was not meat and milk. So you're eating what's in front of you because you're at camp. You had to go to the services, but you did not have to participate. And so it was not forced upon anybody who was not Jewish, just like it wasn't forced upon anybody who was Jewish. However, everyone knew the rules of engagement before you went. Notre Dame, you know the rules of engagement, right? But when I go to Wisconsin, which is my alma mater, that to me is a secular school. So I go in there with no expectation that I'm going to have to pray in any way for any religion in order to do or accomplish anything on campus. And that goes for any campus that I would consider secular. So that's where the court has to understand, or people have to understand, there are places, Yeshiva University.
Well,
they're not going to schedule a game on Friday night. It's
Right.
just how it goes. If you want to play Friday night because you like Friday night lights, then don't go to Yeshiva High School or Yeshiva University. It's not that you get into the school and then you get the rules and say, wait a minute, this isn't what I expected. And as long as that's the case, I'm okay with it.
So there's Yeshiva University, there's Tamir Goodman, and then there's BYU. And spoke to Joe Lenardi last year, and he's like, actually, he doesn't like the BYU rule. So when it comes into contact with then forcing others to change, where does it fit?
So you're asking, tell me, I'm not sure, I don't understand your
So
question.
BYU won't play on Sundays, so the
Okay.
bracket is changed so that they won't play on Sundays, which therefore affects every other team, even though maybe BYU should have played UConn on a Sunday, right? When Faith then has to force others to change their practices in the athletic realm, do you think that's okay?
Yeah, I do. It's just, again, it's the rules of engagement. So it's not that BYU is saying we can't play on the following 3 Sundays. It's just how it is. It's like people who are Shomer Shabbos. You don't ask them, well, listen, we have a really big meeting. I mean, this one's a big one. Our vice chairman was Shomer Shabbos, a former Drexel guy, and he didn't go to Friday night games. I didn't call him from sundown to sundown on Shabbat, all the holidays, whatever they were. That was the rule. Like, I just knew that. So for BYU, when there is that intersection, when you are scheduling yourself or you have to play a school where you know that that's how it's going to be, there's no expectation by any of the players on UConn or anywhere else that they're going to have a Sunday game against BYU. They know they're going to have to play Saturday. And generally, people are pretty tolerant of that fact.
Right.
And it's all about comfort, right? If you know something's coming, you can brace for it.
Right.
What bothers people is when, there's a shadow around the corner that they can't plan for. But BYU is a great example. Chick-fil-A. No one goes into the drive-thru on Sunday. They don't go crazy. They find a different restaurant to go to, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've done so much in your career and your life, and it seems like you sort of get great at something and then shift to something else. Something that you've been on Survivor. So let's take a quick look at this clip and talk about Survivor.
And my life surprising people because I'm good at all things athletic and I'm great at nothing. So people underestimate me because I'm small, but I have the ability to pretty much do anything. I like doing things that are extraordinary that anyone can do. So I did the Ironman. Anyone can do an Ironman. You just have to have the discipline to do it.
So discipline
I
to
had
do
never
things.
seen that clip.
Oh, great.
Wow.
It's out there for sure. You're president of the Marlins. You're like, you know what? I'm going to go on the Survivor. You know what? I'm going to run an Ironman. I'm going to watch a movie a day. How does your mind think in terms of, I love what you said, though, doing extraordinary things that everybody can do? How does that work?
Again, it's all from childhood, right? All I wanted to do was be an NBA player. All I wanted to do was dunk a basketball. And there was no chance, right? And even what I would do is when they were invented, it was the greatest thing in the world. The Nerf I had, I'm talking about the actual baskets that would bend, where the stanchions would bend, and you could make it a 6-foot rim, and I would take a small ball and pretend I was James Worthy. And by the way, that's true. You're in L.A. It didn't even occur to me. But James Worthy, he held a ball like it was a grapefruit. Julius Erving, same thing, just their big hands. And I knew that I had physical limitations and there was nothing I could do. I can't outsmart my own physical prowess, right? I can read, I can learn other languages, I can compensate for any sort of mental failings that I may have by studying harder or working harder. But physical ones, you can't teach yourself certain things no matter what. And so I decided, why don't I just do stuff that it's easy. It just takes mental strength. It takes intestinal fortitude. It takes discipline, because I knew I always had that. Anybody can run a marathon. Trust me. I am no great athlete. Anybody can do an Ironman. But I took 52 weeks. I didn't go out one night on a weekend. Wow. I did long workouts on Saturdays and Sundays, and I cried a lot. And you know what? I got to the finish line within 17 hours. I got the tattoo. And guess what? It's done. It's accomplished. So temporary pain for permanent pleasure are words that I live by.
And was that permanent pleasure? Was the goal something that was satisfying?
That's exactly right. It's doing it, right? It's knowing. It's not publicizing it. It's even though it was on video and even though I was part of a TV show for it, and then even though I was on Survivor, I didn't do Survivor because it was on CBS. It wouldn't have mattered to me that it was filmed. I did Survivor because I grew up in New York City and I can't change a light bulb. Right? And I wanted to just see what it would be like. I wanted to learn what was behind the curtain. I'm the guy who went to the main post office in New York City to get my bar results. Back then, you got them in an envelope, whether you passed the bar. And I didn't want to wait for the main post office to give it to my local postman to bring it to my building. I went to the main post office and I got those bar results before anyone else did. Because for me, when there's information out there that I can know and it just takes effort to find it, I'm going to find it. When there's an activity that can be done, I just have to start doing it. I'm going to do it and I'm going to finish it, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing.
And it seems like you do that with everything in your life, specifically how you broke into business with the famous Sulzberger story. Maybe you can share that. And actually went to Columbia, the Barnard dorms across the street were the Sulzberger dormitories. Tell us about that story, and there was no stopping you and what you were going to do.
So I think that when I give speeches and when people ask me about my career, and invariably you get the question, what's the one word that you would use to describe you? And of course, ask me that question. It's tough to say one word. But the general word that I say is persistence. And the reason why I like that word is it covers all sorts of ills, doesn't it? Because if you're persistent enough, it doesn't mean you have to be the best at it. It means you have to just do it longer than even those who are better, who just get bored with it or move on or can't figure out what's necessary to accomplish the task. So it's the word of advice I give to people trying to get into sports. Everybody wants to get into sports, but they don't know what it means to be in sports, if you think about it. And then they think they're going to hang out with athletes and watch games. And they tend to just disappear after 2 months when they say, oh, my God, this is like any other company. I have to work my tuchus off, and I'm not making a lot of money, and there's someone who wants my job every month in Gedanishtik. So what am I doing? And they're gone. So persistence is what you do when you have a goal in mind and you never, ever let yourself lose track of that goal, no matter what's being thrown your way. And that's how I've always been. I always know what I want, and I always go after it, and I am singularly focused with multiple goals at a time, and I check them off, and I look for the next one. So it's almost an addiction, I would say, which is that trying to find new things to do, new accomplishments, because all of it, I think, comes down to my tummy and sort of the discomfort you feel when there's change. Most people never will try anything. People on the street stop me and talk about Survivor and say, oh, my God, how did you get on Survivor? And I say, I applied. Right? And that blows their mind. Then they say, I've always wanted to be on Survivor. And I would say, well, have you applied? And they'd say, no.
Right.
And I'd say, well, how exactly do you expect to be on Survivor? If you want to do an Ironman, get on the bike. Get in the pool, right? There are things you can do. Put on your sneakers and go do it. If you want to be successful in business, I always believed and knew that I was born on third. But at the same time, I never thought I hit the triple. I knew I was born there, but man, I've been stealing home ever since, right?
Ooh, I love that. So persistence, I think, also works within the spiritual world as well. I just teaching a group of Introduction to Judaism students last night, and I said, the topic was the high holidays, and I said, people come in here 3 days a year looking for the home run. They've never picked up a baseball bat in their life, and they walk out disappointed because they've struck out. Not what we have done, but actually what they have necessarily not done. And some of that persistence, sometimes you get over the fear, but then it runs into a little trouble in the public eye. And one of those things, of course, was building the stadium in Miami, but then building an amazing team. You were on with Real Sports and Brian Gumbel. Here's a little clip of what you had to say, and then we can discuss that. It'll be real quick. It's short.
Unfortunately, what had to be done, and we're sorry that it had to be done.
David Samson is the Marlins president.
We were hoping for a better result last year and in the first few years of the ballpark, and we just had to change course.
So I think the important piece is we had to change course, right? You have the ability to change course. It seems like in your career, if something's not right, you're bullish and going there, but you have the ability, let's use the word teshuva, in terms of looking in yourself and realizing what that course is. How did you get through that and then continue to be successful and not hide away, like you said, but really continue to be out front?
Well, my grandpa always told me you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? and that was an expression he had. I was very careful during my career in baseball. I went to the clubhouse after losses. I rarely went after victories because the owner went in after victories. All the media was all excited. All the family was all excited. But when you lose a tough game, everyone disappears. And I wanted my players to know, hey, I'm here. I may not say anything to you. I'll just pat you on the butt and we'll move on to the next game. But you're going to see my face. When it's bad, I'm not going to go anywhere. And I think that that's an important part about being a public figure and being public facing is you have to show leadership anyone, what's the expression someone told me? Anyone can steer a ship through calm waters.
Right.
And I believe that, and I've witnessed that over my career. But it's amazing what happens to people who start running around like a chicken without a head when things go haywire because they don't know what to do, and they misinterpret action, right, for actually impact. So what they do is they feel like when there's a crisis, they just have to do something, anything. And I've never believed that. When there's a crisis, you actually have to take stock, take a breath, take a beat, figure out what is the best path in order to navigate the crisis. That's what I did with the ballpark. There's certain things that I addressed publicly, certain things I didn't. Certain things I wanted to address, certain things I wanted to correct that were out there in public. But sometimes there are fights not worth fighting because there's nothing you can say that can change someone's mind.
Yes.
But then I would think to myself, is that stopping me from attaining my goal? The goal was to get a ballpark and increase the value of the team. That was my job. And if I had to go on Bryant Gumbel, which, by the way, that clip reminds me, I almost didn't do that show because I was fighting with Bryant Gumbel because he insisted on no air conditioning in the suite where that was filmed because he wanted me to sweat.
Oh,
and
wow.
He has the glasses on the tip of his nose. Here's a little nugget, Bryant. If you're going to put the glasses like that, at least have something on your pad so I can actually believe you're looking at something. But he looks all studious doing that, trying to intimidate me, but I was not intimidated. And, I did that interview because it was the right thing to do because people were so angry about that trade in 2012. But at the end of the day, it was a business decision that had to be made, and I would have done it again. So when you go through life, when you find yourself defending things that you do, it's much easier to do if you understand the buttress of those decisions. If you understand your process, why did you do what you did, it makes it much easier to defend that which you've done.
So on a podcast with, I believe it was Nothing Personal with the actor Eddie Mata, you actually said this about how you view what people write about you, both the good and the bad.
And I had a lot of negative things written about me in my career, and I have very thick skin. But my rule was very simple. I don't believe when people write bad things about me because I know me and I know the truth. But the corollary to that rule is I don't believe when people write good things about me because I don't permit myself to believe the good and ignore the bad because that makes me. Wow. This is your life. So I remember doing these things, and I believe that. That was me saying it, and it happens to be true. When you're in public, listen, when you're a rabbi, you're looking out during the sermon. You see some people not paying attention. You can talk to 30 people after your sermon, and 25 of them may not have any idea what the hypothesis was or what you were trying to teach. But if you reached somebody, anybody, you can feel good about yourself as a rabbi, as a professor, as a public speaker, as a team president. If I can make one memory for one child and one parent in one game, I'm glad that we fielded a team that day.
Actually, that's what you said in a different podcast. You said, I'm in the memory-making business. I think that's also what I am in, whether it's a Yizkor service in terms of literal physical memories or a bat mitzvah this Shabbat where somebody's going to be at their high point. When I look at my stadium, when I look at my clubhouse out into the sanctuary on Shabbat, and I see a person having Kaddish who just lost a loved one, I see a bar mitzvah, I see an anniversary, I see somebody who just got divorced, but they're all in the game. They're all literally in the stadium together for different reasons. And then what will you present? And for me, that's memory. And every Friday night when we say the Kiddush, we say Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, that the command is actually to remember where we came from in order to find out where we're going.
So when you say you're in the memory-making business, I'm gonna ask you a question about that as a rabbi. You recognize that what makes you so effective as a rabbi is that you are helping people understand what cannot be understood. Do you ever think of it in that way, where you are trying to give clarity to people who are so desperate for answers, like we all are? And religion, that's why religion fascinates me, because we all have a quest for understanding. And I could say that in sort of a philosophical way or in a practical way. But if you're going to take the job and put on the cloth, right, whatever your religion is, that means you're taking on such a burden because people are looking to you when you're up on the bima, right? They're looking at you as a conduit of information. And if you don't deliver, they then walk out of your stadium with a level of disbelief or a level of cynicism or maybe a level of disappointment. And that must be hard as a rabbi, isn't it?
So I'm going to quote my father, who is also a rabbi, who actually wrote a book called The Broken and the Whole, and it's discovering joy after discovering joy after heartbreak. And he said he should have changed that subtitle to being Discovering Joy with Heartbreak. And it really speaks about actually living in the gray area. And so when you just said that people come for me to explain the disbelief, actually, I think often our job as clergy is to explain how we can live within the mystery of that. I mean, we talked about the black and the white, the extremes, but the mystery of the center, the mystery of the gray. And so when I see that, right, those same words that we're saying from the Bima can affect the person in mourning while at the same time affecting the person with joy as well. And I think of the manager in the clubhouse, right? The guy who's going 0 for 20 is sitting next to the guy who just hit a grand slam, who's sitting next to the guy that's a 10-day contract, who's sitting next to the guy who's going to be an all-star. But the words have to affect them as equally in different ways. So I like to say that often, if you're going to find a rabbi with complete faith, it's not the synagogue that I want to go to, because I'd rather teach how to live with that doubt of faith, because, and we're going to get to this in a moment, you've also gone through some difficult times in your own life as well. So I think the faith piece is not to give ultimate faith, but it's actually how to live with a level of faith that is sophisticated, knowing that you're going to go through all different ups and downs within your life.
That's perfectly stated. Thank you.
Of course. So in doing a little research, not just about your amazing businesses in the sports world and the entertainment world, but really hearing your personal life as well, found out that you lost a sister of blessed memory. And you speak a lot about time, and I didn't really understand why you kept speaking about that until I heard this story. So this is also on the Eddie Mata interview, and I just want to hear a little bit about perhaps what time means in our own life.
If you live long enough, you're going to live through tragedy, and it's going to hit every one of us. We're all going to join clubs we don't want to be a part of. The club where your parents died, that club. Everyone becomes a member of that if you're lucky, believe it or not. And it's a terrible club. And so the question is, what do? There's some people who just curl up into a ball and wait for it all to go away. There's some people who keep running and running and running because they don't want time or anything to catch up to them. There's some people who will change their appearance and do plastic surgery trying to hang on to the youth, thinking that some sort of changes that way can stop time. I'm different. I totally embrace the fact that time is passing. I'm 53 years old. I'm in the back 9, but man, I got 8 holes left, maybe 7 holes. You can change I don't golf, so this is a ridiculous analogy, but you can change your whole life, right, in the last 7 holes. So let's say I've got 40 years of craziness left. 40 years ago was you know what I was doing 40 years ago?
What were you doing?
Right now, I was being bar mitzvahed.
That bar mitzvah, David, I don't know. It keeps coming up here.
Oh my God, that is quite something. So it's funny watching yourself, right? You have your own podcast. If you watch yourself or listen to yourself, it makes you. It's so much easier to do a show when you don't make things up and you just are really true to who you are. Because what I just said there, that is really me, and that is what I believe. And I'm a control freak, and if I could buy more time, I'd sell every possession I have and buy it. If I could get more than 24 hours in a day, I'd sign up for it. One of my favorite movies is In Time with Justin Timberlake and Amanda Seyfried, if you've ever seen that movie, where they have time, and when their time runs out, no matter how old they are, their time runs out, they're dead. And if they can buy more time, you can live to be 1,000,000. And so it's about the ethical question of rich people then would live forever and poor people would not, and whether or not that is proper. So people, when they're stealing things, they steal time. And so there's all these poems and books and songs about stealing time. And I never subscribe to it because I don't know how to steal time. I don't get how to do it. So instead, I changed it. I like stealing moments.
Yes.
And stealing a moment requires you to be present. And to be present, it is absolutely incumbent upon you not to be out the door, not to be onto your next thing, your next accomplishment. Even though I know that's what I do, I'm very much in the moment where I am, because I know through muscle memory that I've got another moment coming up. Therefore, I'm okay to be present. I'm not thinking about the show I have in 10 minutes. I'm not thinking about the show I have tomorrow. I am present with you right now.
Right.
But the fact is, as you know, we'll finish this. Then someone will show me clips from this, and I'll say, I did say that.
Actually, it's interesting that you say that, because behind me I have the book Where Your Feet Are. It's by Scott O'Neill, executive of former MSG. When I had him on the show, I asked him that question, where are you now? And he said, I'm with you. It's fascinating. Literally hours after, it was about a year ago. That's when he resigned from the Sixers. But in that moment, he was with me in that moment.
It's so important, right? As a rabbi, that's what you, by the way, you do this every day. You've got to be present. You've got to be paying attention. And that is one of the great things you learn when you go to law school. People say, oh, can you tell me about civil procedure? I say, no, I have no recollection of one thing about civil procedure, but I can tell you how to read, I can tell you how to listen, and I can tell you how to comprehend, and then I can tell you all the different possible outcomes of a situation, and that's all from law school for me.
So I love how you say, since you can't steal time, it seems like you use every single moment in time to do something worthy. What does your day look like today? What does time look like today?
So it's funny. Worthy is in the eyes of the beholder. I gave a speech about this where people get pressured into other people's definition of worthiness or success, where if you're not doing what other people think you should be doing, all of a sudden you're not living a worthy life. Worthy to me is much different. I'll tell you exactly what I did. I woke up at 4:22 this morning, and I'd watched the West Coast game in the NBA, and I got a couple hours of sleep. Woke up, and the first thing I do when I wake up, unfortunately, has to do with this. This has changed my life in both great ways and bad ways, right? It is an addiction. I am happy and unhappy to tell you I'm addicted to my phone. I'm addicted to information. And the fact that I do a show every day means I have to know a little about a lot. So I have to hear of different things in sports and culture and entertainment and politics. So I'm reading constantly. And then I'm deciding as I read, is this something I want to remember later or just for now? So where is it going to go in the brain? Short term, mid-term, long term? Like, is this a seminal moment that, oh wow, this is going to come up again? It's got to be long term. So as soon as I wake up, I read. I don't drink coffee. I don't have caffeine at all during the course of a day, but I start reading on my phone. Then I have a system where I've got long, mid, and short-term goals each day. So I check the list, I check my calendar, and I start doing things. At 6 o'clock, I had a workout. I'm training to climb Mount Kilimanjaro this summer and then run a marathon at the summit of Kilimanjaro.
Oh, I'll see you there.
Which is totally insane, but why not?
Wow.
There's very few people who've ever done it, so I might as well try. So I can run forever, but my core is weak and I'm not very muscular. So I got a trainer who's trying to possibly get me into shape to do what I'm trying to do this summer. So I did that from 6 to 6:42. Then I was here with the producer, exactly where I'm sitting now, at about 7:04.
Coca, right?
Coca.
Yeah.
Coca's the producer. So we do a prep the night before. We do a prep the morning of the show. Then we do a post-show conversation, and then we speak during the day about different possible topics that are going to come up for the next show. So I did Nothing Personal, which lasted from 7:04, and the show stopped at 8:23.
Jeez.
Strangely enough, I always have to use the bathroom after a show. I'm not exactly sure why. I could ask my therapist about that. I go to the bathroom, back in the chair for 8:30 when I'm live with Dan Lebitard. Did that until 9:04. Yes. Then I take off my blazer, my shirt. I have shorts on. Put on a zipper sweatshirt because I don't want to mess up my hair if I'm recording something later in the day. If I have nothing later in the day on camera, just audio, I'll put something over my head. But today I wore a zipper sweatshirt. Go downstairs and I look at the phone, catch up on Twitter and any news that has broken since then. Then I watch a movie. And so today I watched a movie about a documentary on Netflix, Memories of Marilyn Monroe, the unheard tapes. So I did that. And then after that, I had to eat lunch and get ready for your show, which I did. I had a sandwich. And then I'm recording your show. And in 6 minutes, while I'm taking a call where I can't talk because I'm actually live right now, so I'll call you later. So then in about 6 minutes, I have one more show. And then I will start preparing properly for tomorrow's show.
That's amazing. So then we'll hurry it up to
Is that too detailed for you?
No, it's amazing. It's the actual moments of what you do. And
that
I think
was
often
actually it.
People think like, you know what? Okay, I'll do this tomorrow. The tomorrow diet, right? And then tomorrow comes and it's today. And then today comes and it was yesterday.
Souvenez-vous demain, Rabbi, is another tattoo. By the way, I spoke to my rabbi before I got my first tattoo.
And how'd that go?
I can be buried in a Jewish cemetery.
Yes, actually, that is usually the question that comes about.
It turns out it was a Bubameister promulgated by my Jewish mother, who told me, second, that if you hit someone while they're chewing or hit them somewhere, or if you cross your eyes can stay crossed forever. That's one she told me. So all these different things. But one tattoo I have is Souvenez-vous demain. And I speak French, and I loved working in Paris and Montreal. That means remember tomorrow.
Remember tomorrow.
It's one of the great phrases in my life because it's so critical. Because if you put something off, you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to feel like, God, I could have done that yesterday. Why didn't I? Now I have to do it today. So Souvenez-vous demain is something I think about a lot.
So one last question. It's a deeper question, and maybe we can come on the show another time. But I saw you when you were on Bob Costas and Break the Record, or back on the record, and Bomani Jones asked you about Coach K, and it was a difficult conversation for me to watch. I love Coach K, and I love college basketball, and to put it bluntly, he basically said Coach K and racism sort of might go together in terms of white players going to Duke, and I never saw that, and then I was very moved by what you said in terms of how you work with the Marlins. So you can just address racism or race and faith in sports and how that works.
So Bomani and I had never met before that show, and I've spent a lot of time after that show talking to Bob Costas about it, and Bomani was angry after that taping, and he was not happy that someone was challenging him, I guess, or not happy that I had a different view than he had. Not happy that I wouldn't confirm what he was saying or get rolled over by him. But let me tell you something. I don't care that I'm white or black. I can't step in the shoes of someone who is black. I can't step in the shoes of someone who needed financial aid to get through school. I can only step in my shoes. They're the only shoes I've ever been in. But I know when I have to make decisions, I have one thing in mind, and it is accomplishing the task. That's it. And I am blinded by accomplishment. I am driven by success in a way that the phrase does not do justice. So when I'm putting a team together, do I have a budget? Yeah, I've got a budget. When you buy your house, do you have a budget? When you run your business, do you have a budget? Everybody's got a budget. I bet even Bomani has a budget. So of course I'm focused on money and on how to build and work my business. But when I have an opportunity to have two people help me, I don't say, oh, I'm going to take the white guy, or, oh, I'm going to take the Dominican or the African-American. I'm going to take the person who my baseball people tell me it gives me the best chance to win most games for the amount of money that we have to pay that player. That's how I look at salespeople. That's how I look at finance, marketing, anybody. And I think Coach K, it's not that he only had white players, because that's obviously incorrect, and J.J. Redick pointed that out. I'm not sure it made the air because so much was edited. That was a 58-minute segment that was boiled down to 18 minutes is what you saw. We were doing that for 58 minutes, and the editors had a tough job to do because it got a little crazy. But I do not subscribe to the premise that Red Auerbach, that was the original argument I was having with Bomani. That Red Auerbach said to himself, I'd rather give Ray Bird over anyone else. Ray Bird was the best player ever. You have to be an idiot not to have Ray Bird on your team. And you have to be an idiot not to have Johnson on his team. So I think it's an oversimplification to say that. However, when you're dealing with octogenarian owners, and I want to end on this, and it's a difficult thing to talk about. There are owners who I've come across who I would regard as racist. There's no question about it. But they're racist, not but, and. They are racist in a way that does not impact the wins and losses. So they may be racist, but they're not saying, give me only white players. But it certainly impacts their front office decisions. It certainly impacts their sales positions and off-court positions. But on the field, I've never come across one racist owner or one owner of any kind who would make a decision to release a black player or not sign a brown player because they're racist. No, because they want to win more than that. And when I say they're racist, I think as a rabbi, maybe you'd agree with me. If you go back, 50, 60, 70 years, there were things going on that were just absolutely racist that people didn't think were racist. And now we're having a spiritual awakening, which I think is such a beautiful part about where we are in 2022, is that we can look at ourselves and say, wow, I didn't realize how that would land. That's not what I would want. That's not what I did want. I'm not going to do that again, but it doesn't take away what we did before.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the story of Exodus from slavery to freedom. That's why when I get together with my pastor friends in the African American community, they speak about Dr. King, I speak about Heschel, and we hope to walk that path together. We are so
Keeping the
fortunate.
faith.
Absolutely. So fortunate to be joined by David Samson. I'm not sure if you've been described like this before, but a good neshama, an amazing soul, the man of Parshat Kitisa. We hope when you're out in LA next, we'll offer you an aliyah for a Shabbat and really get to know you deeper. David, a pleasure. Rabbi on the Sidelines. Have a great week.